Currently, Missouri citizens have some of the lowest energy rates in the nation, 7th lowest, in fact. Why? Because people who came here before you and I made decisions and had a vision for our future. Currently, about 80% of our energy is produced by aging coal-fired plants. We've reached a new era in that we have EPA regulations coming from the federal government that are changing the course of our future. The state of Missouri currently has one nuclear power plant, and it happens to be in my district. We produce about 11.6% of our energy from nuclear here in the state of Missouri. If we go to our east, our neighbor, Illinois, has 11 reactors, and they produce about half of their energy. About half of the energy they produce is nuclear, and they export about 20% of that. To our south, Arkansas has 2 reactors. They produce about 25% of their energy in nuclear generation. If we would just compare us to another nation, France, who has almost 60 reactors. They have 58 and 1 in construction. They produce about 75% of their energy is nuclear, and they are the world's largest exporter of nuclear energy. Obtaining an early site permit is the first step that we need to pass in order to get on the table with additional nuclear generation in the state of Missouri. Our electric providers in this state have come together with one voice. They need additional energy for the future, and they need nuclear as part of their very portfolio. That one voice that they've come together with is called, and you may see a sign over there. It's every electric provider in the state, and it's Missouri's Energy Security Alliance. So what does House Bill 124 actually do? It allows our investor-owned utilities to recoup the cost of an early site permit after that permit is awarded. And then we have to go through the NRC to do so. Our city municipalities and our co-ops in the state already have that authority. The early site permit consists of 3 sections. It's a site safety analysis, it's an environmental study, and it's emergency planning information. That process has to go through the NRC for approval. So why is that a good thing? Why would this be better than what we attempted to do a couple of years ago? It allows the NRC to approve this site before we start building. It allows a wide range of reactor technologies, which gives us the chance to shop around for the best design, the best price, and in turn get the best rates for Missouri consumers. It also puts us in line if the federal government would decide to give some incentives for nuclear generation based on what's happening with our EPA in the state. So what's the overall cost of the early site permit? That's $40 million. That goes to pay for that site safety analysis, the environmental report, and the emergency planning, and the NRC itself to study the paperwork. What does that boil down to our consumers? Less than $2 per year for a residential customer. Now, anybody that's used a credit card knows that if you pay for it as you go, it's a lot cheaper than waiting 10 years, 15 years to pay for that price tag. If we go forward with an early site permit, that'll save the Missouri consumers about $80 million in interest rates. So how do we go forward with this energy that we need for our future and still protect our consumers? First, this early site permit process will take about 3 years. If the NRC does not award the permit, there's no cost to consumers. Not 1 penny will be paid. No permit, no charge to consumers. The permit is good for about 20 years and can be renewed. If that permit is sold, those costs will be returned to the consumers. Lastly, the PSC the Public Service Commission needs to review everything. So all work completed, all expenditures, all the work yet to be completed, anticipated expenditures, all have to go through a review process with the Public Service Commission every 6 months. How does this early site permit relate to jobs in our economy? The early site permit itself does not create a job. What it does do is create the opportunity for us to move forward. If you look at any society on the face of this earth, you realize that if they do not have available, reliable, affordable, safe energy, they don't progress as a society. In order for Missouri to move forward and progress, we have to have those aspects of energy. So let's say we get the early site permit. The next step is to move forward in nuclear generation. Well, what does that mean for Missouri's economy? It means about 3,000 construction jobs. It means about 8,000 jobs, indirect jobs, based on suppliers, retailers. It's about $1.2 billion to Missouri's economy. About 400 permanent jobs at the site itself, and overall, over the longevity of building this, about 4,200 jobs to the state of Missouri. Do you think that might affect our housing industry? Do you think that might affect the pockets of Missouri citizens? I believe so. This legislation will affect every citizen in the state of Missouri. Those people who walk over and flip a light switch, this legislation will affect them and their future. You cannot separate energy from economic development. If you look around this room, we have a large number of people that want to testify in favor of this bill and some opposed. I want you to know that it's a statewide issue. It's not just a Callaway or a Mid-Missouri issue. We have folks from all over the state, and you have packets that have been handed out to you. I think everyone has one, listing a number of the groups around the state that are in favor of us moving forward with nuclear generation. You can flip through those, and some of them you may find in your district. Industrials, our business community, is also in favor of this. And one of those packets will indicate, give you a chance to find it. We have Fred Weber Incorporated. The Gateway Leadership Foundation is a supporter of this bill, which includes Mississippi Line Company and Boeing Company. They all see the need for future nuclear generation. Finally, if we do not move forward as a legislative body to allow the process of recouping these costs of an early site permit, I believe we seriously hinder Missouri's future. Without this permit, we force our electric providers to look to surrounding states for our energy needs and Missouri's overall future. If our electric providers have to look out of state to build future generation, what does that mean? That means one of our surrounding states, the members, construction workers who live there, they'll get those 3,000 jobs. If they have to look to surrounding states, those 8,000 jobs, and for retailers, suppliers, and all the other industry that surrounds that, our surrounding states will get those jobs. What about property taxes? What about our schools and our students? We're going to let other surrounding states thrive while we don't. State revenues. In this economic environment that we're facing, wouldn't we want to look for an opportunity for our revenues to increase? Do we really want to send that money to our surrounding states? I don't think so. Without legislation allowing construction of energy facilities, Missouri will be forced to import energy from out-of-state sources. If you look at California and Virginia, that's what they do. Also included in your packet is some information from the Southern States Energy Board. And I pulled some information from them. They're rather out there of what's going on in the rest of the states in the nation. Missouri has a responsibility to its citizens to ensure a safe and secure supply of power for jobs, economic development, and actually our quality of life here. If Missouri fails to act now and develop a diversified energy supply for the future, our citizens will be forced to pay higher rates due to the increased costs associated with importing electricity. Several states are already in the process of already passed bills similar to the early site permit. Mississippi, Arkansas, Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia, and Georgia, to name a few. We're at a crossroads today. We have the opportunity to move forward, to put Missouri citizens first, to put our energy future first, and to put our economic development first in this state.
As Representative Riddle said a little bit earlier, this state enjoys some of the lowest electric rates in the nation. One of the reasons that it does enjoy those low rates is that this state and our utilities have done a very good job of planning for our future energy needs. And that's exactly what House Bill 124 is all about, is planning for our future energy needs. In particular, House Bill 124 will help address some key energy policy issues for the state. It will certainly address the long-term energy security of the state. It will address the need for abundant, reliable, low-cost energy for our state. And certainly, as Representative Riddle said, it will preserve and potentially create thousands of new jobs. Most importantly, House Bill 124 will preserve an important future generation option for the state. That's nuclear power, which may well emerge as Missouri's best strategy to maintain our already low rates in this state. Now, why is this option important? I think you heard from Mr. Jura and Mr. Kinchel just exactly some of the challenges and uncertainties that we face in terms of some of our aging power plants, as well as the new environmental regulations which are out there. And during periods of uncertainty, one thing which is absolutely valuable are options. And again, this is what House Bill 124 is all about, and that is why you see this unprecedented alliance of electric energy providers here in the state come together to talk about the need for House Bill 124 to preserve that important option, nuclear power, for the future. Ultimately, we will seek, as part of this bill, a site permit through the United States Regulatory Commission. That is how we will begin to preserve that important option for our state. Now, there are several key advantages associated with a site permit. Certainly, a site permit, as Representative Riddle said, is a long life, 20 plus years, and that indeed is a valuable asset for the state of Missouri. It certainly better positions the state for potential federal incentives. Just yesterday, President Obama announced his intention to increase federal loan guarantees by $36 billion. In total, nearly $55 billion of federal loan guarantees are available. Having a pulse going on in the state surrounding nuclear power would be very important to try and access some of those funds. It is clearly a low-cost option. The early site permit will cost our residential consumers less than $2 per year, and our large industrial customers 0.2% on their annual electric bill. And clearly, it creates the opportunity for significant economic development in our state. A new plant would clearly create thousands of clean energy jobs during the construction period and a significant number of permanent jobs thereafter. Now, we recognize very on the importance of such an option to our state, but we also recognize at the same time that any legislation would require robust consumer protections. So several months ago, we sought input from many key stakeholders in this process prior to the bill being filed. So the bill that you have in front of you, House Bill 124, reflects some of the feedback that we received. Key consumer protections included in the current bill include that it only allows for reimbursement of site permit costs only. This legislation is not the broad-based quick legislation that was entertained 2 years ago. Customers will not see one penny on their bill until we have the site permit in hand, and secondly, until the Missouri Public Service Commission does a thorough review of the costs in connection with the rate case. Certainly, if the site permit is ever sold or transferred to another party, we have made a commitment in this bill that customers will be made whole. And lastly, we recognize the importance of transparency. So this bill includes a great deal of transparent reporting throughout its entire process with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Having said that, subsequent to the filing of the bill, we continue to engage in dialogue with our key stakeholders. Throughout those conversations, 3 additional consumer protections have been raised. During negotiations just last week, members of the Alliance have agreed to address 2 of these consumer protections that have been raised by the consumers, and one of those consumer protections will be addressed by the governor in his budget proposal. The first additional consumer protection desired was a cap on the expenditures for this project. The Alliance has agreed to cap our expenditures for this project at $45 million. The second additional protection related to the desire for customers to be reimbursed should a plant never be built. We agree that if a permit expires without a plant being built, the prudence of that decision will be assessed by the Public Service Commission, and if our actions are deemed not to be prudent, customers will receive all of their money back, plus interest. Lastly, additional funding for the Office of Public Counsel was raised. And as I said earlier, this one has been addressed directly by the governor in his budget proposal in January. Collectively, we have worked in good faith to address the issues raised by the key stakeholders, and we believe we have come to a good compromise for the state. Arriving at a good solution on these matters was very important because it's important for us to maintain the option for nuclear power, which may be, as I said earlier, our best bet to keep rates low in the future. And I believe keeping that option open is the most important consumer protection that we have. So in closing, I do want to thank you all again for allowing me to appear here before you today. I believe it is important not to lose sight of this important alliance that we've actually come together here with all the utility providers. I will tell you that this alliance is not lost on, or just not noticed by those in the state. I can tell you that those in Washington have noticed, including the Department of Energy. But I think it's just as important, it isn't just the electric utility providers who are supporting this bill. What you see behind you and who you will see soon will be a widespread support for this bill across the state, including labor, large and small businesses. You'll hear about municipalities, you'll hear about chambers of commerce, and you'll hear consumers that support this bill. And it's also important to recognize that there's bipartisan support for this bill here in Jefferson City, including support by Governor Nixon. At the end of the day, the bottom line is that this broad-based support is for a good reason. It is simply the right thing to do to protect the long-term energy interests of our state, which is critical for our state's economic future. But as important, it will help assure that our children's children will have access to clean energy at low rates. They are counting on all of us now to plan well for their future. Thank you very much.